bacon?
Yeah. Bacon.
Poles are down.
Actually, I don't know if it's bacon. Just ate like. Oh my god!
Oh my
Gosh!
gosh.
Bacon!
Bacon. So catching giant bass on docks in the summertime can be one of the hardest things to do because when you look around, it seems like everybody and their brother is fishing the same docks you are. Well, in this video, you're gonna learn how to go right behind these same people and catch bigger bass and more bass just by changing a few different things and adapting a few different strategies to your game. So let's dive into it. So docks are one of summertime's favorite fishing patterns. It seems like when everybody goes to the lake, on all of these man-made lakes we have around here, there is an abundance of docks, and it's one of my favorite ways to catch fish. And if you're watching this video, chances are it's one of your favorite ways to catch fish because YouTube recommended that you watch this video on docks or you searched out a video to catch more fish on docks. And so what I want to talk about in today's video is how to separate yourself amongst a minefield of docks on what seemingly these banks have endless of, and how to differentiate these docks and what makes them good. And at the end of this video, I'll even talk about some of my favorite baits that I like to throw on these docks that help get me more bites amongst crowds and amongst different conditions that are always changing out here on the water. So first things first, I'm doing this video right now because summertime is one of the best times to get on docks. It seems like it is one of the best things that those fish have as far as shallow cover, and when those fish are shallow right now, that's where they're gonna go a lot of times, is underneath those docks or into the grass. But docks can be a great way to catch giant fish. Jason Christie once said that if he had the opportunity to catch a 10-pounder or a true giant, the first place he's gonna go is to docks, because what it is it is a house for big fish. They can get on that isolated piece of cover, which is what a dock is, and guard it away from all other bass and have it to themselves. And what makes docks so good is they always attract bait fish because there's plankton and stuff growing around them. It adds cover, it adds shade, and there's structure for these fish to get around. So if it has bait and it has the shade, big bass are going to show up, which is why we're going to talk about docks today, because you can catch a mega sack on docks this time of year. What also makes a dock good is typically there's two reasons. The one is that there's nothing else on that bank for that fish to get on. It's a barren bank except for those docks. There's no grass in your lake, there's no real offshore cover, so they get along those docks. But the other main reason is there's grass that grows around these docks, and so underneath these docks, what makes them so good is going to be open areas underneath the docks. The shade is going to stop any grass from growing underneath of it, so there's going to be a little perfect pocket for these fish to sit in and ambush bait as they come out of the grass, where they really can't see a whole lot around them. They'll come out, and those bass can be right there to ambush them, which makes it a perfect ambush spot, which, as we all know, largemouth absolutely love. Now, there's other types of docks too. We have floating docks and cable docks. Cable docks usually are on Lake of the Ozarks, all of these Midwest lakes where they raise and lower the water at all times. What makes those docks so good is those fish can suspend and attract around these bait and have access to super deep water. So they can slide up and down these cables and sit right underneath them because, again, there's algae and whatnot growing around them, so there's bait fish that are going to be around them. And so those fish can slide up and down and get shade in hot conditions while still having that access to the cool water. Floating docks are great for that same exact reason. They can get right up underneath those docks, attract shade, and that shade also camouflages those fish a little bit. It makes them a little bit harder to see from the bait fish and the fish that are moving around there, so it gives them another ambush point. But those are the four types of docks and the four reasons that I really think those fish are going to get around them. But now let's talk about how to dissect a minefield of docks, which is seemingly on most of the lakes that have docks, there is hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. And so you need to figure out what docks are going to be good and what docks are going to be bad, because believe it or not, there is a pattern, when no matter how small or how big, that delineates certain docks from other docks and makes them better than the other ones. So one thing that I typically try to do when I'm dock fishing on a lake that has a ton of docks is imagine the lake without any docks, and then try to put myself into the time of year and the reason that those fish would be on them. Because a lot of times big fish like to have access to deep water this time of year. They like to be able to get up to those docks when the conditions are right, which is something I'm going to talk about here in a little bit, and also get away from them when the conditions are not right for them. And so I typically just erase the docks out of my mind and look at the structure on the bottom of the lake. Look for points, look for back-end bays, waterways. Look for areas that the current is going to hit. Give myself some semblance of why those fish would want to be there. Docks on points this time of year are always amazing because that point is an ambush spot for bait coming around it. It's cover for those fish, and so they can sit there, but they can also escape into deep water. If you get rough waves or you get a cold front, they can kind of get away from that. And so that's why I look at the structure underneath and look at the topographic maps or the Navionics chips or the Lake Master or whatever you happen to have. Imagine the lake without docks, and then you'll start to get a little bit of a pattern. Now, that doesn't always work because a lot of lakes that have docks, I have a couple right near me, are just these super shallow areas and there's just docks everywhere and there's not a lot of points and most of them are big bowls. If you're having that same problem, what you have to do then is look at what the dock's set up like. You have to look at the structure of the dock. Is it a metal dock? Is it a wooden dock? Is it a dock that extends off the shore? Is it a dock that's close to the shore? Sometimes the docks that are close to the shore are good because nobody wants to fish them. Are you catching fish on the slip in the front? Are you catching fish on the slip in the back? Are you catching fish on the walkway coming to the dock or the end of the dock? Because one thing you have to typically think about, especially this time of year, is how other people are going about fishing the docks. Most people, when they pull up to a dock, fish the end of the dock and then go on their merry way. So what you have to try to do is fish around that dock and see if there's a different hidden gem inside of that. You also might have to look at the grass that's around the docks, or if there's brush piles under the docks, because that's a really big thing in the Midwest this time of year, is guys always love to put brush piles by their docks so that way they can go out and catch crappie at a whim. So you have to break down what is around the dock or what is underneath the dock to dissect what docks are going to be more productive for you as you get out there on the water. So like I promised, let's talk about a few baits that work really good on docks this time of year. If you guys suck at skipping, or if you're new to skipping, there are certain baits that are going to work a lot better than the traditional jig that everybody likes to throw. And so that's the first bait I want to talk about, is a jig. A jig does a great job at being adaptable, and you can throw it in all different types of situations, which make it really good. The downside to a jig is everybody and their brother likes to throw it. So you end up throwing the same exact bait behind other people on these highly pressured fisheries, which is no good. Now, if you're on a lake that nobody really fishes, if you're on a small little trolling motor only lake, or just a Midwest lake that nobody really fishes, pick up a jig because you can catch a ton of fish. It is snag proof, so you can do a really good job at covering a lot of docks while not getting hung up. Now, for those of you guys that are on highly pressured fisheries, I recommend baits like a Texas rig. A beaver on like a 1/4 or a 3-ounce weight skips extremely well and does a great job at sliding back underneath those docks, because most oftentimes this time of year, the further you can skip under those docks, the better off you're going to be, because most people that fish docks suck at skipping. So the better you can get that bait under there, the more natural you can get that bait under there, the more bites you're going to get. Another bait that does a really good job that everybody throws is going to be a Senko or a Wacky Rig. That is something that undeniably is always going to catch fish, but typically I like to rig it a little bit different depending on how I'm fishing it. I like to either put a Nico rig weight in it, or I like to go to a little bit bigger Senko or a little bit smaller Senko, because that's something that can really be key. Instead of throwing the same 5-inch Senko, changing up that rate of fall a little bit can really pay dividends and getting you a couple bigger bites or a couple more bites. Some other baits that work really good on docks are going to be things like chatterbaits, swim baits, even topwater frogs. And what that's going to depend on is that's going to depend on the conditions that you have on your lake at that given time. If you pull up and you have a day like today where it's overcast, there's some waves going up against it, I like to throw baits that I can cover more water with. Something that's going to draw more strikes. A big swim bait is a really good example of that, because like I talked about with Jason Christie saying you can catch giant fish on docks, sometimes you have to throw giant baits on docks. And so that's when I'll go to that spinner bait, that chatterbait, that swim bait, when I'm covering water, especially if you have a shad spawn. Not really worried about that this time of year, but you get what I mean. If you have the right conditions, it makes really a lot of sense to throw some of these bigger baits to get more bites out of these fish and potentially get bigger bites. Now, if you're a guy that has brush piles underneath your docks, I would be going to things like a Texas rigged worm, a drop shot, maybe some other type of bigger jig that you can really put under there, even a spoon for a lot of you guys that like to fish those lakes where they're suspended. Now, another one of those lakes that has those suspended docks and those cable docks, spoons work really good, swimming a jig works really good, and skipping a weedless swim bait work amazing on those docks, because those fish will suspend, they're not on the bottom. And so having to understand whether you're fishing docks that you're fishing fish on the bottom or fishing suspended fish is going to be absolutely critical in the baits that you're going to want to throw, but hopefully those baits give you a little bit of an idea as to how to kind of set up on these docks. So like I talked about, one of the best baits to throw is going to be a Senko. I'm going to have a video linked up here where if you like this video and you want to learn a little bit more, you can check out this video where I talk about, are you fishing the right Senko? Because there's a right Senko and a wrong Senko, or stickworm, however you want to call it. I prefer to them as a Senko. So give that video a like, because you're going to love some of the content that's in that. But thank you guys so much for watching. Don't be afraid to hit that, smash that subscribe button and like this video if you really enjoyed the content. But God bless you guys. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.